I had a few misunderstandings with the time zone being on the other side of the world. Nice to see you. Wonderful jacket. The compliments, Father David. And thank you for having me on for this very important conference, Nephilim Anthropology, which I decided to take from a different perspective. Okay, so my talk, which will last approximately 40 minutes, wants to kickstart from a title which I given to my speech: Cyber Satan, the Jesuits, Aliens, and their one-world religion. People will say, what are these topics so mixed together? Is this some kind of new age thinking? No. As Father David just said, I base my work on hard evidence and facts. I'm an investigative journalist. I had also an experience in various mystery schools. Today, of course, the topic of the day is the Nephilim. So let's start talking about the Nephilim as they appeared in one of the most important films of all times by a British film director. I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick, of course, and 2001 Space Odyssey. Why am I starting from this? Well, we are going to go from alpha to omega, and the omega point was something that basically appeared in the work of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit, which basically inspired Arthur C. Clarke's work, who of course wrote 2001 A Space Odyssey. And the subjects that were discussed in this film include also a mention of the extraterrestrial, the ancient aliens that nudge the cognitive evolution of early humans. But what a lot of people don't know is that there was, in the early stages of the making of Kubrick's film, there was actually a 10-minute prologue which was taken out in the end, in which Kubrick interviewed various scientists and members of the religious community. And within these interviews, there was also a mention, of course, of the Nephilim by Jeremy Bernstein, professor of physics at the Stephen Institute of Technology, who basically intervened in this in this part of the film that was basically cut out in the end. So what was he saying? He said that basically, and I'm citing, of course, what he said during the interview, there is talk about this Nephilim. Now, in the Bible itself, in the 6th chapter of Genesis, there is a rather mysterious reference to the sons of God who married the daughters of men, and then a reference to something called Nephilim, which means, as it has been translated, the giants. Whereas a good part of Jewish explanation and exegesis maintains that this was simply a race of strong men, there were certain Jewish sources, such as Philo in ancient Egypt and Josephus, the Jewish general and historian, who saw this as a reference to a mysterious kind of race, which I suppose in contemporary terms, says Professor Jeremy Bernstein, is a reference to a mysterious kind of race, which I suppose in contemporary terms means an extraterrestrial race. Now, this was part of the original introduction to 2001 Space Odyssey, a film which was also based on the concept of the omega point. So what is the omega point and what are we talking about here? Now, the omega point is a supposed point in future where everything in the universe spiraled towards a final point of unification. Now, I tend not to agree with everything Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, like I tend to not agree with everything the Jesuits say, because the Jesuits are an order, of course, that pushed an agenda, the agenda of the Catholic Church in the Counter-Reformation. For example, we have the preterism. People don't know that preterism is an important part of Jesuitry. And what is preterism? Well, if we stand by what preterism is, basically we will, as Christian, not believe in the imminent return of Jesus, because for the preterist, everything already happened. Starting with the book of Daniel from the 7th century BC until the 1st century AD, and in the book of Revelation for the preterist happened in the 1st century AD. So by doing this, the Jesuit kind of fought the Christian expectative of the return of Jesus, which is very important, especially in this time and age. And they did it with a Jesuit called Louis de Alscar, who wrote Investigatio Arcani Sensus in Apocalypse. And so we are here today to discuss what is happening, because the warnings that were given in the film of Stanley Kubrick, 2001: Space Odyssey, are very important. A warning concerning also this artificial intelligence, this artificial intelligence which, of course, is evolving, as well as other things that are evolving in today's society. Just last week, scientists announced the mixing of human and chimpanzee, macaque embryos in test tubes here in California, and Elon Musk and his Neuralink showed how a monkey was inserted this computer brain interface that basically permitted to this monkey to play mind pong without using the joystick at one point. And people will say, oh, wow, wonderful, how nice. No, this means the end of the human species as we know it. And so when it comes down to something extraterrestrial, something that is not of this realm, you have to understand where this technology is coming from. We have to understand that, for example, here in California, there was a very strong base of occultists / Satanists, and modern Satanism started here in 1966 with Anton Levi. But at the same time, we know that in December 1965, the Second Vatican Council ended. And it's the Second Vatican Council that is going to sell us next month, between the 6th and the 8th of May, a conference organized by the Vatican, in which basically Jesus or the Holy Mary are not mentioned once. And it's basically a parade of New Age gurus, together with infamous Dr. Anthony Fauci, the one who promotes the never-ending lockdowns. So the Vatican is guesting in a couple of weeks people like Deepak Chopra, Buddhist evangelist Tukam Chimpa, Sufi spiritualist Azim Yusuf. Now, why I'm criticizing this mix of people, some of you might think is all positive, but participating to this event, there is also the CEO of Pfizer and the CEO of Moderna. And you are basically participating in a global dictatorship experiment that will end up with the modification of your DNA, the modification of the human species as we know it. This should make us all very worried, because it's not anymore a theory we are talking about. We're talking about something very practical. The moment in which China is promoting so aggressively artificial intelligence, and they want to take control of it by 2030, that means they want to basically take control of the planet. And this planet is launching itself towards Mars, just as predicted in 2001: Space Odyssey, and they're passing through the moon as a base to launch the colonization of Mars, just as it was predicted in that film. So you see, science fiction is kind of prophetic in a way. And at the same time, we can understand that the AI can be a threat and a danger, just as Al in the film, when he starts to lose it. And in the end, it becomes obvious that we can become victims of the artificial intelligence. That's why just a few days ago, the European Union has launched a new set of laws, probably in the future, aiming to control the ethics and the morals of this expanding technology. And the fact that the Vatican is promoting all this, the Vatican was promoting a year ago, at the end of February 2020, just in the early stages of the pandemic, an historical conference on the AI. And people didn't give it much interest because, of course, it was the early stages of the pandemic. Things were starting to spiral out of control. But if you go and check the actual title of this event that took place on Friday, the 28th of February 2020, was called REN AI Sans. And participating to this event, there was Microsoft, IBM, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. There was, of course, many important people. And a few months earlier, as I mentioned also in this book I wrote, and I wrote also a specific book which I published even earlier on the subject of cyber Satan and artificial intelligence, which is volume 6.66. So these things have been all put on my books for people to read and for also view how I envision this future. And unfortunately, most of the things that I written in the past came into fruition. In volume 2 of my confession that was published in the English language in 2015, I predicted there would be a virus in 2020 that will lock everybody in their houses. And that will be the beginning of the end. The fact that people don't see the connections, well, there is a connection directly with the UFO word that was actually included in a bill that was signed and that will finally reveal to us certain secrets by the Pentagon, by the intelligence community in June of this year. There is a countdown that was started with the signing of this COVID bill that for some reason included also this element. So people should start to think maybe there is some correlation there. So we're seeing also the Pope pushing aggressively towards a one-world religion. What does that mean? I mean, first starting in Abu Dhabi, this human fraternity document that then developed in an encyclic called Fratelli Tutti, all brothers, very Masonic, the terminology that he used. He's not promoting really Jesus, he's not promoting God and all this, he's promoting the unification of all the world religion because they are hurrying up expecting a Messiah. In Israel, in the last few months, there's been a lot of talk of the arrival of a figure that basically might be Enoch, might announce a reincarnation of Elijah or something, and might announce the arrival of their own Messiah, which of course is a Messiah that never arrived in the Jewish tradition, but is a Messiah that needs to still arrive. And so, as we saw, the figure of John the Baptist was himself considered a reincarnation, and itself functioned as the introduction to Jesus. And now we are seeing a lot of talk about a messianic figure that is coming out of the Jewish world, the most orthodox Jewish world, Will this create a new Sabbatean movement, which was, of course, an heresy within the Jewish movement, that then created also the Frankist movement? And the Sabbatean Frankist movement is definitely still an heresy that exists within the Jewish movement. So will that just transform itself in an heresy? So the thing is that we are witnessing things that are unprecedented. The talk that there is nowadays between amongst the rabbis in Israel, especially after these severe lockdowns, after the fact that their freedom has been limited, after the fact that most of their population has been forced into vaccinations, because otherwise they will not even be able to go and shop at the supermarket. It's incredible that we are at this point. And of course, I understand what has happened in February this year, when the whole Jewish community worldwide came together and prayed for the Messiah to arrive in this day and age. Because, of course, if we had to respect what are the official expectatives of this Messiah for the Jews, it should arrive more or less around the year 2240. But they have prayed for him to anticipate his return. Sorry, his arrival, because, like I said earlier, they never had the first arrival of the Messiah. They never accepted Jesus as a messianic figure. And then we have, of course, people like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and the Jesuits, who instead have promoted this Jesuit thing, which is Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness was promoted for centuries within the Rosicrucian movement, which was hijacked by the Jesuits. It was hijacked and it gave birth to the Golden Rose Cross. And the Golden Rose Cross was then codified into a Masonic system around the 1750s, but this system was also built together with the Sabbateans. And the Sabbateans, then with the arrival of Jacob Frank, who said he was the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi, because for those who don't know, the Sabbateans believed that the Messiah of the Jewish world was Sabbatai Zevi. And then Jacob Frank, a century later, said he was the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi, and this movement was very strong. So what is happening today? Well, we are witnessing, of course, a period of time which will go on from 2021 to 2030, which will decide basically the future of humanity as we know it. Because it's definitely true that if a Messiah comes too late, he will not be able to do his job, because in 10, 20 years from now, when the artificial intelligence will have taken control of the world, when most humans will be microchipped or will have a computer-brain interface or will in some way be interacting with the artificial intelligence on a constant basis, well, at that time, at that moment in time, I'm sorry, but a Messiah will not be able to do his job, because people will be simply marked by the beast, marked by Satan. Satan uses the technology. The Nephilim, they are described as giants, but they are also described as fallen angels. Now, depending on what kind of description or interpretation you want to take, these fallen angels have a plan. And when here in California, the occultist, I mentioned earlier the modern Satanism that started in 1966, but the modern Satanist milieu, let's say, started in California a long time before with Aleister Crowley's followers and the Ordo Templi Orientis that, of course, developed here in California. That's why then they made the joke calling it caliphate, because Kali, fat. So there was this whole thing. But basically, Jack Parsons, Hubbard, who then became later on the founder of Scientology, were here where I live now, where I reside now, in the Mojave Desert, opening portals with this extra-dimensional creatures that at that point could come into a reality in a much more easier way, also because at times they need to be invited by us. Of course, certain bloodlines have a karmic connection with the Nephilim, with the fallen angels. Others don't. And so they have to open themselves in order to get possessed in that case. And the possession is also a subject connected to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, because in reality, going back to this famous Jesuit, which I mentioned today, he was the inspiration for the film The Exorcist, which everybody knows. And he was even at one point, I think, in the film, it's shown even his image in one of the rooms, I think, of that priest, the younger one. And there was actually a Jesuit who participated as an actor in the film to supervise the whole thing. The Jesuits are now in control of the Vatican, but they're not only in control of the Vatican, they're in control of the world. They have the second Catholic president in history in the White House, who is basically willing to destroy the American way of life, because he's doing the job of the Great Reset. Now, the Great Reset, we talked, especially in my shows, in my work, in my books, about this Great Reset. It was announced by Prince Charles, by the way, together with this guy called Klaus Schwab, happens to be also distant relative of Dr. Fauci, because people figure out almost immediately that Dr. Fauci is an Italo-American. No, Dr. Fauci is an Italo-American with connections to Switzerland. And Schwab from Switzerland, from Davos, has announced this Great Reset, which by the year 2030 wants to destroy all private property and establish what is basically the kingdom of hell on earth. Because communism or slash socialism, when you take away property and you feed people with a universal basic income, I'm going to give you $1,000 to survive, that is enslaving people. That's not giving people the incentive to live. When I went to the former Soviet Union and I was able to talk with politicians, intelligence operatives, and others, I interviewed them. I studied their experience of communism. They said, is the incentive, the motivation that is missing from a socialist or communist reality. Because people, if everybody's earning the same wage, there's no incentive, but the incentive here is created because they are ruining the economy of the planet in order to establish this Great Reset, which goes hand in hand with the one world religion and hand in hand with the artificial intelligence that it needs to be fed data. So they let out of a lab this virus, this mutating virus that will never end, will become endemic, that we will need a shot every year. And at that point, you are enslaved by this system. And at that point, the artificial intelligence is, in the meantime, getting fed data, your information. Since the beginning of this pandemic, drones are flying over people's heads. The security is tightened. You can't even take a plane without giving all your information. You can't even go to a restaurant in New York without showing your green pass. So basically, we are in front of the realization that the artificial intelligence is vampirizing all our data. And we have already, unfortunately, given most of our data to social media. And that was also incentivized by the fact that we never paid for Facebook. We never paid for every other social media we interact with. But our information was then sold to the highest bidder or absorbed by the artificial intelligence, which is being developed as we talk by Google, by Facebook, but also by China, which seems to be now in control of Silicon Valley now more than ever. And so my interpretation of today's conference is that we are in front of a turning point in history. We are in front of that noosphere described by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, which is basically, and Wired said this, not me, said that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was the father of the internet, because the noosphere is the web. So we are going towards the suicide of mankind if we don't stop all this. But at the same time, we know that the prophecies are always right. And so we don't have really a chance to stop all this. Eventually, this confrontation between the forces of good and evil will give us a new world, but not a brave new world like Huxley. Because then here I am doing this conference that is, of course, organized from England, the place where H.G. Wells, Huxley, Orwell. And now we go and see what England is doing to its population, Great Britain. From the 17th of May, they want you to have vaccine passports to circulate. That is part of the plan. So the cover of this book, of course, Metropolis, famous film of Fritz Lang. The fact that we are going and running towards transhumanism. Some people might think, oh, wonderful. This will give us a great opportunity. Well, I don't consider suiciding our soul and suiciding mankind to embrace the beast a good idea. So I hope that my talk today has at least come at the end of a conference where everybody has really cleared a lot of points that needed to be cleared. But now we are living in the now, in the Ich et Nunc, in the here and now, where we need to act. And our actions will create the humanity of tomorrow or the non-humanity of tomorrow. Because if we give our new generations, especially the new generations that are now learning most of what they're learning through remote learning, that they are isolated, our younger people are living a nightmare that they are starting to consider normal. Now, that means that new normal means that they are starting to be indoctrinated with the basis of something that is inherently evil. So these aliens, as we want to call them, have helped the creation of our civilization, but in the end, they have come here to ask for the bill. And the bill might be our soul, Father David, and I will never give my soul. Thank you so much for having me today on your conference.
The one and only Leo Zagami. Leo, it would not have been the same without you. You're a tour de force. You're a wonderful guy. I'm deeply honored to call you a friend of mine.
Thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for your initiative. I wish you good luck with this initiative, because the world needs to have these secrets revealed, because know the truth, and the truth should set us free.
Amen.
Thank you. Amen. God
God bless you, Leo.